Hi everybody, Keith Tanner here from Flyin Miata, and on this episode of FM Drives, we're going to be driving Indy. Indy is a 2016 ND chassis Miata that was our development car for the V8 conversions. This car is packing a 525 horsepower LS3 engine. It's got a T56 Magnum transmission in the middle. At the back, we've got the rear end out of a Pontiac G8. And the end result is basically a car with over 500 horsepower, 2,600 pound curb weight, wet, and a front to rear balance that's actually better than the Fiat 124 Spider that shares the same chassis. So as you can see, there's not much outside the car to give you a hint of what's lurking underneath. If we hadn't put this big stripe with LS3 V8 on the hood on the car, you wouldn't know what was going on underneath. And that's why we had to put that stripe on there, because otherwise for the journalists, there was nothing to show that this was not just another ceramic mica Miata. We had to make it, a little bit more special. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump in the car and take it for a ride on some of our local roads here and try to give you a feel for what it's like to drive one of these little baby supercars. So the first thing you notice when you get in the car is that there's nothing to notice. This is a completely stock Mazda Miata GT interior. The gauges are slightly modified in terms of they've got a different back face on them. You've got this roll bar back here, of course, but otherwise there's no indication of what's going on under the hood. Even the shifter's in the stock location. But press this little button here, it becomes obvious. So, welcome to Indy. From behind the wheel, it looks completely normal. There's all this, the gauges all look normal, they all work properly. The gear shift, the gear indicator is right there, it works normally. It's just standard Miata. But while the interior is standard Miata, obviously the soundtrack is a little different. There's a nice purr going on back there. So this car is more than just a big engine little car. I mean, that's the fundamental recipe, but in order to make that recipe work, you need all the other ingredients. And in this case, that's our Fox Racing suspension. It's based on our 4-cylinder version, which is it's our flagship suspension for this chassis, but it's got spring rates that are dedicated to the V8 car because of its ability to lay down a lot of violence on the suspension, and also because of a slightly different weight involved. It's got Wilwood 6-piston calipers up front. It's got Wilwood 4-piston calipers in the rear with rotors that are almost 13 inches in diameter in the front. It's got 9-inch wide wheels with 245 series tires on them, as much tire and as wheel as we could physically fit in this chassis. And that all comes together to give it a nice flowing feel, a very, very civilized feel, but also the ability to go out to something like Laguna Seca and just pound around on lap after lap after lap, exactly as it sits right now. It's a very cohesive package. I very much like it. I'm very proud of what we were able to pull off with this car. This is the prototype for all of the ND Miatas that exist. At the moment, at the time of filming, there's about 10 of them in the world. There's a few more being built right now, but they're a fairly rare vehicle. And this one is the one that they all came from. It's the one where all of the hard development work was done, all of the testing was done, all of the parts that were developed for it were tested on this car. And it shows that it's been evolved to be a very smooth, very easy car to live with. The fact that I'm driving along on this crazy little tight road and yammering on about it without having to scare myself is a good indication of that. So everyone expects the performance of this car and even the noise to some extent, but what really strikes you about it is the fact that it's actually a very comfortable place to be. The suspension is compliant, it's got all of the torque in the world, so it's very flexible, and this means that it's actually a good place to spend all day. I have driven 1,000 miles in a day in this car, and it's no punishment. other than the fact that it's Miata sized. So if that's a punishment for you, that has not changed. But it's just friendly and comfortable despite the performance that's under hood. The steering has been changed from the Miata's stock electrically powered assisted steering to a hydraulic system that's GM based, because they have a very deep parts bin, and it feels really good. It's got that, I don't want to call it an analog feel, but it's got that mechanical feel that you get with hydraulic power steering. Lots of feel through the wheel. All the geometry is the same as a stock Miata, so you get all of the same sensations through it, more or less, that you do with a stock one, and there's no weird bump steer, there's no weird Ackerman behavior from a moved rack. So it feels very natural the way it is. And that's what pretty much sums up this whole car, is it just feels natural. It doesn't feel like some sort of science experiment or some sort of mad science thing where all of a sudden there's nothing but engine and no chassis. It feels, believe it or not, it feels balanced. As part of putting in this drivetrain, we had to add some support for the transmission. And if you're going to be putting extra metal in a car, you might as well make it do a job. So we actually added a great big brace on the bottom of the car. We call it the spider brace because it looks like a spider web. There's just tubes running from point to point depending on where the load paths are. And the end result is that this car actually feels stiffer than factory. When Car and Driver took it in for testing, that was one of their questions. Well, what have we done to make it stiffer? Because it actually feels not like a little wobbly flexi flyer that's got a giant engine in it, but it actually feels like the whole thing has become more of a whole. And you can feel that here. You can feel that the suspension has a stiffer platform to work on. It's got a more solid base, and so it's able to do its job better. And the whole car just feels like it's a whole. It feels like it's all designed to work together. There's nothing sort of sticks out as being overwhelming compared to the rest of it. I mean, you can drive like a meathead and just smoke the rear tires all the time if you want to, but that's up to you. If you just roll into the throttle, it has no problem hooking up. When we did testing with Car and Driver, the 0 to 60 time was 3.5 seconds or something like this. They were testing a 911 at the same time, and this thing was actually the 0 to 5 mile an hour. The initial jump off the line was faster in this car than it was in the 911, despite the fact that 911 is basically built to be a drag car with all of its weight over the back wheels. So it's actually got a lot more ability to hook up than anyone ever believes. One of my favorite tricks on this car is the closed throttle overrun. It's got a little burble, so if you're on the throttle for a little bit and then you lift off, you get this little bit of mortar fire out of the back of the car, and I can't help it. I'm a child. I love it. So just tootling along like this, it feels just like a loud Miata right now. I'm not having to do anything with the shifter to maintain a nice, easy speed through this climb because I've got all the torque in the world, but I'm not having to make any allowances for it. It's just smooth and easy, and this car is a great cruiser because it's got that big well of torque. You can just put it into gear and just surf along in that torque. 2,000 RPM, no problem. 3,000 RPM, no problem. Whatever, take your pick. I'm going around a corner here at 20 miles an hour, and I'm in, I think, third gear, and the car doesn't care. This is a great road to show this car off because you can just leave it in one gear and just surf on the torque. There's no need to be rowing the shifter all over the place. I mean, you can do that if you want to. You'd be going extremely quickly. But in terms of just a nice, relaxed cruise, it's actually quite good at this sort of stuff. So everyone expects the performance of a car like this. I mean, you know it's got this much horse, it's got 500 horsepower, it weighs 2,600 pounds, you know it's going to be fast. So what's always interesting about seeing someone drive this car for the first time is seeing them realize that it's not just about performance, that it works. That it is comfortable, it's got a good ride, it's got a very compliant chassis, it's got a very forgiving chassis, because at the core of it, it is a Miata, and we spent a lot of time making sure that the geometry was as forgiving as a Miata is. So it's on your side, It's not trying to bite you. It's not trying to spit you off into the weeds to prove just how good a driver you are. You know, it's not like an old 930 turbo or something like that where surviving it was a badge of honor. This car's on your side, so it's giving you all of these tools to go quickly if you want to, or to cruise along in third gear if you want to, or do whatever you want to do without any sort of consequences, which is an amazing thing. The engine itself, I mean, it's the classic small block Chevy. It's the LS3. They make millions of them. There's parts for them everywhere, and they're a very well-refined engine. The thing I like about them is they have excellent power density, which means they're quite compact for their power level, which is why they're so popular for swaps like this one. And the fact that they're an aluminum-bodied, aluminum-head pushrod means that they're small and quite light for their power, so it doesn't penalize us. If we had tried to jam something like a Coyote, that big Ford engine in here with the dual overhead cams, it wouldn't be able to fit under hood. I mean, you'd be paying the price in terms of the footwell, you'd be paying the price in terms of what you could see, the hood wouldn't fit. So the fact that the LS engine is such a small, tiny little thing is an integral part of this particular package. So the steering in this car does not have the electric power steering that Mazda put on all the other ND Miatas. For packaging reasons and partly for old school reasons, we went with a hydraulic steering package, which is effectively right off the shelf from a Camaro with some modifications. The nice thing about working with GM on these things is that they've got a deep, deep parts bin, and you can put together just about anything you want to. And the end result is a very natural feeling steering. It doesn't feel over boosted. It doesn't feel as if there's something deciding what the boost level should be for you. It's just good old school hydraulic steering. It's got just enough weight that you can get the information you need to, but you're not fighting it. All the controls in this car feel very balanced. The one thing that is noticeably different than a stock Miata is that the shifter is more mechanical. The stock Miata shifter is a very, very light feel. This one has more of a solid feel to it. You can definitely feel that you're moving around very tightly machined parts inside. Nice little click click. It's not grossly heavy, it's not obnoxious to use, but you can tell that there's a lot of machinery in there. The clutch is a little bit heavier than stock as well. It's not objectionable. It's got similar pedal pressure, I believe, to a Camaro, for example. So it's more than you would get with a stock Miata, but not excessively so. The road we're on is called Rimrock Drive. It's in the Colorado National Monument. It's an amazing road. It's not one that you go on if you're looking to set lap records, because one, it's a national park, or it's in the national park system, so there are consequences to that. But secondly, there are some serious consequences. Not a lot of guardrails here, and a lot of drops. But it's gorgeous, and it's perfect for taking a car like this along just to enjoy the swell of the torque, the scenery, the soundtrack. It's a tough day at work. One of the fun things to do when you're taking somebody for a ride in this car for the first time is to just sort of pussyfoot it for a while so they get used to the sound, they get used to the fact that the dichotomy of that noise and this interior, and just enough to get them sort of relaxed and off their guard, and then you just have to crack the throttle open and their eyes get really big. It's kind of a fun game. So this is exactly the sort of road that Miatas work very well on, and this is still a Miata at heart. It still works. You could certainly ask it to do something stupid, and the car would do something stupid, but it's not going to bite you unless you ask it to. That's one of the secrets of these cars, because of that big flat torque curve, because of the very effective posi-traction rear end that we have in these things, because of the large amounts of mechanical grip. We're not relying on electronic band-aids or traction controls to sort of control things. It's just inherently a very easy car to drive. You've got all the tools you need to make it perform, and without any sort of compromises in terms of throttle response or in terms of a harsh suspension or a clutch that bites in a big hurry. It's all just friendly, and that's the key to basically extracting performance out of one of these. Is you've got to make it accessible, and once it's accessible, then you can have some fun with it. One of the fun things about this car is it's got an active exhaust, which means we can actually change the volume and change the sound of it simply by adjusting the windshield wiper intermittent speed. That's tied into the valves that open up the exhaust and bypass the mufflers. So depending on how I have it set, there's different noise levels, which is kind of fun. You can either be antisocial and make all the noise and yell and scream, or you can be a little more subtle and drive home at night without setting off all the car alarms in your neighborhood. Whichever one you're looking to do today, we're going to turn it up because, I mean, how could we not? So this is the sort of place where the open exhaust is kind of fun. You have to. I mean, it's required. You probably heard that in downtown Grand Junction. So this is one of the secrets about this car, is the fact that it can be this completely psychotic thing on track with just ridiculous amounts of horsepower being fed through the rear wheels and speed like you would not believe, but it also is just a normal everyday car. It's got this big flat torque curve. It's got a very easy to control torque curve because of a nice long throttle. It just feels like a Miata, and it actually makes for a very, very good road trip car because you can just jump in this car and ask it to do anything. As we're driving it today, the state of tune that it's in, its suspension, its tires, and like that, is exactly the same setup that we use when we're taking it to the track. When we're at Laguna Seca, it's got the same spring rates, it's got the same shock settings, it's got the same sway bar settings, alignment, tires, everything. We can take it to the track as it sits right here. When we took it to Car and Driver for their instrumented performance testing for 0 to 60 and 0 to 150, yes, 0 to 150, the stopping distances, the skid pad, it was exactly as it sits right here. It's pretty amazing how a car like this can be this flexible and not necessarily need to be sort of reconfigured every time you want to do something different. I think that's one thing that makes it feel so friendly is the fact that when it is on the track, it's not been tuned to a knife's edge. It's just given you some nice friendly tools to let you extract all of the performance. And we get the same thing on a road like this too, where there's nothing sort of standing out as trying to bite you. It wants to be your friend. So there you go. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to drive and to ride along in one of my favorite cars. I love this thing. What can I say? It's just, I'm not ashamed of it whatsoever. So thanks for watching. My name's Keith Tanner from Flyin Miata. We hope you enjoyed this. If you did, comment, like, subscribe, you know the deal, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.